What is up, everyone? We are ready for week 2 of the college football season. Um, Excited to be doing this at RotoPros this year. We have first main slate really of the season today. I'm going to hold off for just a couple minutes, see if anybody joins in. But we have our first real full slate of the season today with some Power 5 teams playing. ACC is getting started up today, so we have some games there this morning and tonight. A couple Big 12 teams on the docket all day. So you can check out my article on the site. It's already up. It was up last night for the main slate today, and I'll have some thoughts on the night slate as well in the chat, and then have a skeleton lineup for each of those slates as well. We have a ton going on over at RotoPros right now. Obviously, it's a massive weekend in the world of football with the NFL starting tomorrow. Football, I guess, with EPL going on right now. Just got that started up just now, locked for the main slate for that league today, just starting up their first game week. College football day and night slate, as I've talked about. MMA, which Kenny crushed last week, so be sure to join in for that. We got, of course, MLB, NBA, and NHL are winding down, but we're still covering those showdowns as well. And then we have the U.S. Open next week, so it's no better time to join in and get your free trial at RotoPros. Join us in the Slack. We'll break down all these slates, so be sure to join in. The first thing I want to do today is really talk about some college football strategy as opposed to NFL. Sometimes you do get people that bring NFL strategies over to college football, which is definitely fine. It's very similar as far as lineup building. But the main thing with college football is that it's so much higher scoring. You're going to see teams put up massive amounts of points. The totals in every game, for the most part, are higher from week to week than the NFL. Obviously, the NFL shifting a little bit now to where there is a little bit more scoring, but you're still seeing higher point totals, higher spreads as well in college football. We'll get into that today, especially in the early weeks of the season. Like West Virginia is like 45-point favorites today, so we'll get into that. So some of these players do not play the full game because of that. But I'll be sure to dive into that as we go through each game today. The value plays, there's not a lot of value today. And the thing with college football, it's kind of hard to find some news, which provides an edge for if you're using a site like us, that we're kind of helping you do that. Finding that news for you, posting it for you, breaking it down as it comes out. It's not as readily available as it is for the NFL, so you can find these gems in news that comes out throughout the day, and you're going to maybe find a lower owned play that is the difference maker on the day. So if you have any questions, I'm going to go touch on each game similar to the article. But if you have any questions as I go, just be sure to drop them in the chat. I'll be checking that as I go. That's the main thing. What I want to do today is break down each game and answer questions is the main thing that I want to do for you all. My article is out there. It touches on each game as well, but I just want to go back through that and answer any questions that you all have. So the first game up on the docket is that West Virginia game. It is the noon kickoff right at lock. West Virginia, Eastern Kentucky. We saw Eastern Kentucky last week, played Marshall and got stomped in the ground. So I'm going to be completely fading them. Obviously, you're not playing a 45-point favorite and a 58.5 total. Anybody on that team, but West Virginia is certainly viable. It looks like they're projected to score in the 50s in points for sure. The thing is, like I just mentioned, will these guys play the entire game, or will they come out at halftime, come out in the third quarter? If you play people in this game, which you definitely can, and I would want to target this West Virginia side. If you do, they're going to need to get there probably by half, unless you're playing one of the cheaper guys that can get there in garbage time in the second half. So starting quarterback for West Virginia, 8,200, Jarrett Dodge, or however you say that name. I'm going to butcher some of these names because they are a little bit newer. He played toward the end of last year. He played the last few games and led them to some better things than they were doing in the early part of the season. So he's getting the start, 8,200. He doesn't run at all, so he's going to be a little bit lower down my list. I don't think I'm going to get there today. Not paying 8,200 for a guy that needs to do everything he's going to do in a half. And if Letty Brown, who's going to be the lead back, 7,700, if he steals a touchdown or two in that first half, I don't think the quarterback Dodge is going to get there. So Letty Brown is definitely the lead back this year. Split time in years past. He's perfectly fine. Again, he is fairly expensive, and we don't have a ton of value is the only thing with him. But, man, this offense is going to score points. It just depends on who gets it. Somebody's going to get there. Sam James, 7,400, is going to be the lead receiver probably for them this year. TJ Simmons is going to be the number 2. There's a pretty big price discrepancy there. So, like I said, if you get to the end of your lineup and you don't have enough for James, but you can get to Simmons, then I'm perfectly fine with that. It's really all these guys are in smash spots as 45-point favorites. Not much else to say about that. The one guy I do want to mention, I've not seen much buzz about him around the industry at all, is Isaiah Esdale, 3,300. I played him some last year. He's the second slot guy behind Simmons. So he should get some garbage time work. He should rotate in and out as in the first half even as well. So he could be one of the value plays that we have to play, but you're not going to feel great playing any of these guys. So Esdale is viable. All these guys are viable. It just depends if they can get there in the first half in this massive blowout that we're probably going to see. All right, so the second game on the slate is North Carolina, Syracuse. North Carolina is now a 24-point favorite, 67 total. That's crept up a little bit. I love North Carolina today. I got on them early in the week at minus 22. It hovered right around there. They return all of their skill position players this year. Sam Howell at quarterback is going to be a high draft pick next year. He's the highest priced player on the slate, 8,900. And he's got his 2 star receivers back, Daz Newsome, 7,900, and De'Ami Brown, 6,900. Newsome's maybe the more explosive guy, but both of these guys are definitely top plays on the slate as far as receivers go. I'm fine doing a Howell, Newsome, Brown triple stack there. You don't necessarily have to play all 3. You could play Howell in one of the 2. But I think you definitely need exposure to Howell, and you definitely need exposure to one of those 2 in your lineups today. They're very explosive. We saw that as things started to mesh together even more with Howell and these guys later in the year. Bo Corrales returns. He's kind of the taller reception receiver, not as dynamic as far as big plays, I guess, but he is a red zone threat with his size. And then in the backfield, Syracuse was very bad against the run last year. They did get a new D coordinator. Just be interesting to see how that changes anything. I think you can definitely go to Michael Carter, Javonte Williams. 65 for Carter and 5,600 for Javonte Williams. Carter, more of the open play back, I would guess you would say. I mean, they had almost identical yardage last year, but Javonte is the bigger guy that they're going to put in closer to the goal line. So Carter's more of the big play guy in my eyes, and Williams is more of the punch it in at the goal line, which it has its value for sure in this type of game. They could hit a big play to Newsome or Brown, and then punch it in with Williams to vulture that touchdown. So both of those are viable. Not sure I'm going to end up playing, say, 4 of these guys, but I'm probably going 2 or 3 of them for sure. On the other side, Syracuse, I don't really like them today. Taj Harris is probably going to be their number 1 receiver. DeVito played some in and out. He's had some injuries over the last year or two, but and he wasn't the main starter. So he's played kind of in and out. Taj Harris and Naheem Johnson are going to be the 1-2. Both of those are fairly cheap. And if you go maybe 3 of these guys, maybe for North Carolina, maybe you do run it back and hope that they keep it close with throwing a couple touchdowns to one of these guys. And that helps your North Carolina stack be able to stay relevant, stay pushing towards the end zone. So that's where I'm at with that game. I love the North Carolina side, like I said. As far as betting right now, I don't know that I would take -24. That is kind of a key number. Not as key as when you get down to like a 13 or a 14 or a 7 or something, but I think they do win by more than that, but I wouldn't bet it at -24 right now. And with the other game, I would not bet either side. West Virginia, 44-point favorites. No, forget that. I think they're going to crush them, but I'm not betting that. So the next game I got is Kansas State, Arkansas State. We saw Arkansas State play last week. I think it was Memphis. They held tough for a while. Memphis pulled away at the end. For Kansas State, they're a little bit more of a disciplined team. They're not as high-flying as Memphis usually is. So I think you can expect a little bit of a slower game than we saw with Arkansas State last week. Kansas State returns Skylar Thompson at quarterback, 6,800. He's one of the viable quarterbacks for me today for sure. He shows some of these games he'll absolutely just crush with his legs. He has the rushing ability. That's where his value is really. He obviously throws some, but when he has big games, it comes on the ground. So I think he's viable for sure. He's not my favorite second QB behind How, but he is at least 2, 3. He's probably 3 or 4 for me. They're about 2 touchdown favorites and a 54 total. Malik Knowles is probably going to be the number 1 receiver for them this year. He was good for them a year ago. He's 6,100. I don't know that you necessarily have to stack Thompson with Knowles. If you want to play Thompson alone, I think that's perfectly fine. The backfields is pretty much a split. So I'm staying away when we have other guys that I don't think is a complete split or are cheaper. I'm going to go to some other plays on this slate. So I mentioned in the article, this is a pretty simple game for me. It's almost going to be Skylar Thompson or nobody in this game. I suppose you could take a chance on the Arkansas State side on their receivers, either Adams or Dahu Green. I don't think I'm going to get there. They're not cheap enough for me in the matchup that they're in. So Malik Knowles and Skylar Thompson are the only 2 that I'm going to look at from this game, with Thompson being my favorite for sure. So the next game I got Iowa State, Louisiana Lafayette. Definitely is one I'm going to be targeting today. Iowa State is now, let's see if it's moved any. Yeah, 11.5 point favorites. They were 11 when I wrote the article, 56.5 total, and it was the same total there when I wrote the article. I love the Iowa State side for DFS. They return almost like North Carolina, except they did lose a couple receivers. They return a lot of their guys this year on the offensive side. Brock Purdy, he's been there a couple years now. 7,300 is a great price for him. He's shown some upside with his legs. but he does get it done through the air for sure. One of his favorite receivers is probably going to be Tariq Milton. He's kind of the slot guy, bigger play guy, kind of the quick, small, shifty type player. 6,400 is a touch expensive for him in the role that he plays. I don't think he's ever going to be the guy who gets 15 targets or something, but he's viable in GPPs at least for his big playability. My favorite receiving option is going to be the tight end, Charlie Kohler, 4,500. I played him a lot last year. He's one of the good tight ends in the country. And 4,500, you can pair him easily with Purdy, or you can play him alone. The other guy in this offense is Xavier Hutchinson. He's going to step in and be more of the deep play threat, kind of like Milton, but I think he will get maybe some more targets even. That might be a little bit of a hot take. I'm not sure if he's going to have more targets than Milton, but today I actually prefer them Kohler, Hutchinson, and then Milton on the receiving core. You could potentially play two of these receivers with Purdy. Maybe you only go one because I really like the running back Bryce Hall, 7,000. That's pretty cheap for what we saw last year from him. I think he's going to be a staple of my lineups today for sure. He showed the ability to take a bulk of the carries last year. He was a pretty big workhorse in the second part of the year. After he had that one big game, he kind of just stuck it out through the rest of the year, took over that backfield. So I clearly expect that to happen again. And this matchup, Louisiana Lafayette is definitely no pushover. They were pretty good last year and returned a decent amount of guys. So I think this game stays close. I think they're going to be pushing all game. So I like all those skill position guys for Iowa State today. Louisiana Lafayette, I'm not as enthused about. They're kind of more of a run-heavy type team, so I'm not interested in their quarterback really at all, Levi Lewis. He does a little bit more passing, and this backfield is going to be muddied with, I think they have like 3 or 4 Orrs as their starter, so it's going to be one of those guys is going to be starting. Mitchell, Ragus, Smith. I think it's all going to be muddied, and I'm staying away from that. Peter LeBlanc, Jalen Williams, and Dante Fleming are the 3 receivers. You could potentially take one of those if you go super heavy on Iowa State. Maybe run it back with them. LeBlanc and Williams are probably the safer guys. Fleming is a true freshman. And it's interesting to see when true freshmen are listed as starters on a pretty good team as well. So he could be a 4,000 guy that you could play potentially. That kind of wraps up that game. Heavy on Iowa State for me. Maybe run it back with one receiver from Louisiana Lafayette. Army, this is another team I got on early in the week at like minus 19. That's not out there anymore. They're minus 22, so it went through the key number. 53.5 total now. Crept up half a point since I wrote the article. They are, if you read the article last week, they were on the slate. They crushed 42-0 against Middle Tennessee State. Now they get Louisiana Monroe, who has been ravaged in the offseason. They don't have much coming back on the defensive side or the offensive side. It's just kind of I really like this type of team, Army, who's going to impose their will through this triple option, control the game. I really like the Army side. Christian Anderson was the quarterback last week. He should be, by all accounts, he is the starter today. 8,100 is kind of expensive when he's only a rusher. Threw 4 passes last week, and this type of offense, you're not seeing much more than that from week to week, and especially in a game I expect him to crush. So Christian Anderson is going to have to get there with his legs, and that is certainly viable. Sandon McCoy had 3 touchdowns last week. They punched it in with him at the goal line. But I do think he's going to get a little overowned just based on last week, 6,300. I mean, he only had 50-some yards, and it's because he's that fullback in this offense that they hand it off and he gets 3 or 4 yards straight up the middle. So 15 for 53, if he don't have a couple touchdowns, he's not getting there. And he's probably not breaking 100 yards. He certainly could. But I don't think I'm going to go to McCoy today, but you certainly can, especially maybe in a cash game setting or something. But Anderson, I look at him as a running back, and I like him a little bit more even at the elevated price. To McCoy, we've seen in recent years with like Navy and other of these teams that run the triple option that the quarterback can have massive days. So Anderson is viable. I would probably rank him behind Purdy, and he's right there as the number 3 option with Skylar Thompson for me at quarterback today. The one last guy I want to mention in this game, because I'm completely fading Louisiana Monroe with how much I like Army. Kyron Robinson, 3,400. I think he had 9 carries for 95, 94 some yards last week, and that is super cheap. I need to dig a little bit more right up until lock to make sure all of those carries weren't in garbage time when they were up 40, but hey, I expect that again this week, and we're kind of starved for value. So if you want to play him, you certainly can, and hope you get his 9.4. I'm assuming that's what he had. I don't think he had any catches. Let me see, double check. If he gets you 9.4 points again, let's see. Well, it's not in DraftKings, but 9.4, he had 94 yards. I don't think he caught a pass. But if he gets you that at 3,400 in a slate that we don't have much value, I think he could certainly pay off. And look how close he was. I mean, those are some of the things that we look at in NFL when guys are held just under 100 yards and they don't have a touchdown the week before, but they had a decent amount of carries or they had a decent amount of catches. They're right there for the 100-yard bonus. If they have a touchdown, they're going to almost double their points on the week right there with 6 more yards and a touchdown. So Robinson could be a slate breaker value, but he's not without his risk, obviously. 3,400 for a guy that might just be getting run in garbage time. But like I said, I think they're going to crush them today. I think there is going to be garbage time with this team. So Robinson's a definite value play, an option for me today. And that's about it with this Army team. I would rank them Anderson, Robinson, and then McCoy, honestly, as far as points per dollar today. The other backs, it's just so spread out in this type of offense that you either got to take the guy who gets the most volume or the guy who is the cheapest and the most explosive. So those are the 3 options that I have for Army. A couple more games, and then I'll be sure to drop any questions. I don't see any in the chat right now. So if you have any questions about any of these that I'm talking about, anything, just be sure to drop them in and I'll get to them. Notre Dame and Duke. This line is now at 21.5 and a 52 total. Actually bet this game at Duke plus 20, I believe, earlier this week. So now I look like an idiot. But I still do like the Duke side from a betting perspective. The total's actually come down a point since I wrote the article, and Notre Dame's went up as a favorite by a point as well through a fairly key number. So maybe the odds makers are not liking the Duke side quite as much from a scoring perspective. But not a big shift. Chase Bryce is going to start for Duke. That's the main thing I like about this team as far as a season standpoint. Maybe not in this matchup, but 5,300 is cheap if you need the value. You could go to Chase Bryce. He looked like more of a passer at Clemson. He's the transfer coming in this year. wasn't playing behind Trevor Lawrence, so he transferred to Duke, where he will start. I don't know that he has the upside that I'm looking for today. The wide receivers that I would potentially take a chance on is Jake, Bobo, and Noah Gray. Bobo was a guy that tried to make work some last year, but it didn't necessarily happen. But hey, he's the cheap guy in this offense. He could pay off for us at the price $3,900. He fits a lot of builds as the last guy in. Noah Gray is the tight end. He's a very similar price and similar type play as well. Jalen Calhoun is probably going to be the top receiver, but I'm not going there. 5,700 is too steep of a price for me today. I would go to the cheaper guy in this Duke offense or nobody. Probably leaning towards nobody. On the other side, Ian Book, 8,700. He's been there a couple years now. He can get it done with his legs. He did lose some of his receiving core and his running back last year from last year. So it's going to be some replacing to do, and I don't know that they've had a ton of time to get acclimated with each other, all of these guys, but Kyron Williams is going to be the starting running back. They do shift around a little bit with these guys. So Kyron Williams would be the guy that I play in this offense or in the backfield, but I think I'm going to stay away personally from that split backfield in this game. You could certainly go there. The receivers, Javen McKinley, 7,200 would be my favorite. Ben Skronek is a transfer from Northwestern, is another option as well. He's kind of more of a possession type guy, not going to be a big play. So 6,500 is a little bit steep for him. McKinley, he can break some bigger plays as well. If you want the cheaper options, I did not put these in the article, I don't believe, but Braden Lindsey is probably my favorite cheap guy for them, 4,000. And then Tommy Tremble is the tight end. He's fine, but I would rank them McKinley if you're going up top, Lindsey if you're going down low, and then Skronek and Tremble would be the secondary pieces. Lindsey for the value is probably going to be my favorite out of that group, and I'm probably not playing Ian Book at his elevated price in this game. I have a little bit too much respect for the Duke defense, even though they're 21-point favorites now. I do think that this is a little bit more of a stay-away game for me. If I go anywhere, it would be, like I said, to Lindsey or potentially McKinley in this game. So last game on the slate, Georgia Tech, who was awful last year, Florida State, who was not very good last year either. Florida State did at least get a new quarterback. Mike Norvell came over from Memphis. My Hokies have some experience with Memphis grads as coaches with Justin Fuente. Hasn't went so well yet, but kind of going off topic. Hey, we got some bad news this morning about them postponing the Virginia Tech-Virginia game next week. So COVID's popping up in Blacksburg a little bit more. So we're going to have to wait some more time for college football in my parts of the country. But anyway, Florida State is now 14-point favorites. That's crept up a little bit, 51 total, which has dropped half a point since the article. This Georgia Tech mess is kind of weird. They didn't put out a depth chart. So really it's going on a lot of what ifs for this team. Jordan Mason looks like he's got to be the running back for this team. 5,300 is okay. I obviously think they do try to get the running game going a little more. It's not a triple option offense as it was in years past with Paul Johnson. Jeff Sims has been the news says that he's going to be the starter at quarterback. So if we do get confirmation of that, I mean, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution is what is reporting that on DraftKings right now. So, I mean, that could be for sure a reliable source. 4,500 for him. Got a little bit of rushing ability for sure. I think we might see a little bit of a rotation, though. I don't know that he's going to play the entire game, especially if they get behind. So Sims is viable in GPPs if you need him to get up to some of the other position players. He's not my favorite. He's definitely behind those other guys that I mentioned as well. Mason is the only other guy, like I said, that I would look at in the backfield as far as receivers. Yeah, I mean, if you want to get in large field tournaments, if you're multi-entering, then I would definitely have a stack or two of Amarion Brown, who is a very good receiver for them last year. He was probably, I think he was the lead guy for them a year ago. Obviously, there's not a lot of volume there is the problem. Even though they're not a triple option offense, they're still a run-first offense. So if you're multi-entering, you can definitely take a cheap Jeff Sims, Amarion Brown stack. He's 4,700. Like I said, not my favorite, though. On the Florida State side, this offense should be improved with Norvell. We saw a lot of running offense that crushed last year and led to those running backs getting drafted from Memphis. And we'll talk about those some tomorrow, I'm sure. The running back here is going to be – they're going to be trying to replace Cam Akers, who's now in the NFL for Florida State, and they're going to do that with Jashawn Corbin and LaDamian Webb. There's a pretty big price discrepancy there. Corbin he came over from Texas A&M, and that they're looking at a split backfield. They're listed as either or on the depth chart. 6,800 for Corbin is just too steep for me, honestly. Webb is much more playable, 4,500, even if he gets a little bit less than half of the work in this offense. Georgia Tech was not good against anything last year on defense. So Webb would be my preferred option in the backfield. James Blackman is going to get the start. If you watch some of their games last year and before that, oh, Lord, he's dreadful to watch, but he can put up some fairly big numbers in some of these games with his arms, and really that's just due to the fact that he has Tamorrion Terry out on the outside. Man, he put up some massive games last year. He's probably the top receiver option on the slate from if you're looking at just the receivers. Him and Daz Newsome are I mean, they're the highest price, but they're probably the top two options. Here's my thing with Terry. In some of the builds I've been playing around with, I don't know that I'm going to get there because I am trying to stack North Carolina. I am trying to stack Iowa State, who is the cheaper side. And I do like North Carolina more than maybe a Florida State stack. But if you're building multiple teams, going with some Terry and Blackman stacks is definitely viable. And you can play Terry by itself if you get up there. Maybe if you build a North Carolina stack that does not play Daz Newsome, maybe a Sam Howell and De'Ami Brown stack. And instead of Daz Newsome, which would be the more popular route to go in teams like that, maybe you go Sam Howell, De'Ami Brown, and Tamorrion Terry as a pivot there, and go with the cheaper side of that North Carolina stack. That's definitely viable. I could potentially do that for sure. The other guys, I don't really want to touch any of these other receivers. I mean, they could get there. Thompson. I just think I'm staying away and going with Terry, who's probably going to have a pretty good game, and and Webb as the running back. So those are the three guys that I like on the Florida State side. That's the late hammer game, 3:30. It's on an island by itself. It'll be finishing up with the Duke Notre Dame game. So that kind of wraps up my thoughts on the slate. if there's any questions, be sure to drop them in. I want to get to them. That's what I'm here for. I know I broke down most of the situations there on the slate that I'm targeting. But hey, be sure to drop any questions you have. If there's any value guys that you like, drop them in the chat. I'll stay in here for a few minutes longer. We got about an hour and a half before lock. And checking some EPL scores. Looks like we got a goal from Crystal Palace. Zaha. All right. So is there any questions? I'll jump on out of here. Gonna try to do this most weeks. Obviously, there's probably going to be some more full slates as we get deeper in the season, as more teams start playing. There's no SEC games, I don't think, this week. So that'll be starting up. There'll be more ACC teams on the docket once NC State and Virginia Tech and Virginia actually start playing. That will be in the coming weeks. It's going to be fuller slates. I'm not going to touch on the late slate here. Be sure to jump in the chat and get my thoughts on that. Some great teams on that slate later tonight. Louisville is the ACC team that, I mean, they're not great, but that offense became dynamic last year. And then Texas and I think Oklahoma is on it as well. So going to be a fun night slate. Obviously not as big contests as we have today, but be sure to join us. Get your free trial. You're not missing anything. We have NASCAR today. Xfinity is 2:30, 2:45, I believe. And then my article for tonight's race at Richmond in the Cup Series is up on the site as well. Second race of the playoffs. So be sure to jump in to the Slack and get all of our thoughts on that. It's going to be a big day, big weekend. So be sure to join in. No better time than right now, and get that free trial through the weekend. So I'm going to jump on out of here. If you have any questions, just hit me up, Twitter, on Slack as well. And we'll get on out of here. So good luck to everybody today. First big full college football slate. Very excited for it. Let's turn some green screens on and take one home. Good luck, everybody.